Night owls, what is the scariest thing you've experienced while everyone else was asleep? Thought I saw my sister's cat go behind the lounge chair and thought nothing of it, but then I saw the cat sitting on top of the desk on the other side of the room. After turning on the lights and looking around for a bit, all the while freaking out, I crouched to look under the lounge chair to see if there was anything there. I lifted up the footrest and something jumped out at me and started clawing at my arms and chest. Turns out, a possum managed to get into the house and also my soul left my body in that moment. My ex used to live next to a very historical part of England where lots of Vikings used to raid, and I swear her house changed my mind about ghosts. I stayed the night at her place one night and woke up screaming from a nightmare and heard something crash downstairs. I thought I was going to have to actually fight and tackle someone as I heard loud, slow footsteps going up the stairs. I sat there, waiting, and thought I was just hearing things, but the dog was on edge staring at the door as well. Once the footsteps got to the top of the stairs, it stopped. I opened up the door and looked downstairs and nobody was there. The ex was sleeping with earplugs and didn't hear any of it, but the fact that her dog was also on edge made me think I wasn't just hearing things. I was camping next to a river deep in the mountains that was also a gold claim. My father's friend owned it and had my dad take me and my little brother camping there. It was very warm that time of year, so we didn't even use tents. Just a large picnic blanket on the ground with our sleeping bags on top. I've always been able to pick up on things, and if anything unexplainable paranormal happens, it's typically when I'm around. For example, the wiring to the light in my living room ceiling fan is completely disconnected, but that light will randomly turn on only when I'm around. It literally will not turn off until I leave or if I kindly ask it to turn off. Anyways, I was getting really weird vibes at this gold mine. I kept having dreams every night about drowning with my father in the water with me trying to help me but ultimately failing. Until one night I just couldn't sleep. I was tending the fire to keep myself occupied when I noticed my little brother get up out of his sleeping bag and start walking towards me. Once he got close enough, I noticed he was sleepwalking. My little brother has never sleepwalked before, so I thought it was kinda odd. Especially odd when started walking towards the river. I tried to redirect him to the sleeping bag, but he was an unstoppable force. I was probably more than double his weight at the time, and the force with which he walked with pushed me out of the way even when I firmly planted my feet. He was in between 5 to 10 yards from the river when I got my dad up. He rushed over to my little brother just a few feet from the water, and as soon as he touched him, he snapped out of it and went back to his sleeping bag. My dad stayed up with me for a bit at the fire, and I told him how forceful he was walking. My dad said he felt how strong he was walking even in the split second he touched him. He was probably 50 pounds at the time and effortlessly pushed me. After about 10 minutes of talking with my dad, we both got extremely tired and went back to sleep. The nightmare of drowning with my father trying to save me but failing ended that night. The weird vibes were still there but not as strong. My little brother doesn't remember this at all. I saw some shit that, growing up neurodivergent and in a very isolated area, didn't bother me but apparently scared the shit out of my roommates when I told them. Nearly every city in North America, even the really big dense ones above the Mason-Dixon line, has a population of urban cougar. They mostly eat outdoor cats and stray dogs, but they absolutely will come up to an open window if they hear a baby crying to see if they can swipe it. Black bears sometimes just walk around on their hind legs and do people things. When I lived in Durango, CO, there was a sow that lived in the neighborhood that would walk on the sidewalk on 2 legs from 2 to 4 a.m., open mailboxes, look in them, and close them again. She'd also look in windows if you had the lights on then, like a person at a zoo. Other times I'd see her in the park sitting at the picnic benches like a person. I thought she was delightful, but apparently I'm in a minority opinion about that. Seeing a kid under 11 outside after midnight is never a good thing. It's happened twice to me. One was a 10-year-old boy running from home after his drunk mother threw a glass at him and gave him a serious head injury. The other was a toddler that had escaped the house fire that killed her parents. Always step in if you see a child outside alone after midnight. Found out there was a guy living long-term in the drainage culvert greywater sewer near my house after I watched him crawl out of it. Bill was a deeply troubled man that would scream and bark at people like an animal, and the police failed 3 times at extracting him from the sewers. My family left him homeless care packages, socks, hygiene and first aid stuff, some non-perishable snacks and a book, and a McDonald's bag with 2 McDoubles and a small fry at least once a week so he could have a hot meal. He wouldn't take homemade stuff for 3 years until one day he just stopped appearing. Going out at 3 a.m. and seeing the McD's bag from the previous night in exactly the same place was the worst thing I ever saw. We tried for 2 months after but nothing. I can only assume his body is still in there somewhere. One late night, I walked out to my balcony. I live on the 12th floor of an apartment building, and super thick, dense fog had covered everything. Now super dense fog by itself isn't too bad, but I live in a really big city, like top 20 worldwide kinda big, and near zero visibility fog is not common here at all. I've never seen it so bad. It was Silent Hill-like. Also it was oddly warm outside, despite being like 3 to 4 in morning. So that was really weird and unsettling. Got worse when I started hearing screams though. A scream that sounded like, "No," or, "Help," followed by a blood-curdling, "Someone is getting murdered" level scream. I went back into my room, closed all the doors, drew the curtains and turned off all the lights except for the one on my desk. Something like 20 to 30 minutes later, I decided to check outside. The fog was completely, 100 gone, and it was super cold out. Visibility was perfect, like there wasn't just pea-soup thick fog literally less than half an hour ago. From what I searched, fog doesn't vanish that quickly, and usually forms when it's cold, so I have no idea what the hell happened there. Looked at the news the next day, nothing unusual was reported though. So also no idea what the screaming was. TLDR, incredibly dense fog never seen in the area rolls in the middle of the night, there's screaming, and less than half an hour later it's completely clear. Haven't found out how the fog vanished so quickly, and no unusual stuff in the news so to know what the screams were. I forget the name for it but I remember learning about it, but in cities something weird can happen sometimes. Heat typically rises and cold typically sinks, but sometimes in cities the cold air can get stuck on top of the warm air. So if fog were to form it would form above the warm air. But the fog would probably be too heavy to stay on top. It would sink down into the warm air but probably not last too long because the warm air would warm it up to the point you can't see the fog anymore. Being on the 12th floor makes sense because the fog probably would be gone by the time it got nearer to the ground, but you're just up high enough to experience it. It might be a rare occurrence or something that happens more often certain times of the year. I wish I knew the correct terminology and how to explain this better, but that seems like the only way to make sense of it. But either way, you heard someone fucking die. I live in a desert area. Just the other night, probably around 2 or 3 a.m. I found a tarantula in our family's kitchen when I went to get a snack. Now I'm generally a brave person, but spiders scare the shit out of me, and this was a fucking mammoth spider. I didn't know what to do and I didn't want to wake anyone up, so I just left it there and went back to my room on the other side of the house. I didn't tell anyone in my family about it. They aren't really dangerous to humans anyways, and no one in my family has reported seeing a giant spider, so I just want to assume that I got out the way it came in, but I've definitely been getting a little paranoid about leaving my room at night. I had stayed up a while and then I started to hear the sound of the door downstairs being pushed open. It has 2 locks, one is a chain lock and the other was a door lock. I know the door lock could have easily been broken off or picked, and the sound I heard sounded like a door that was being rattled and slammed trying to force open the door with the chain lock still on. I heard it over and over again as I freaked out and laid perfectly still as I started to cry because I thought I was probably gonna like die or something. I texted my sister who had a room across from mine in the basement. I asked her to call our mom but it was 3 a.m. and she didn't answer. Oh, and my room has 2 huge windows on each side of the wall, so that's a great thing for me, my sister, and finally decided to get up and investigate. The door was closed so we checked the garage and then my cat ran out from the garage. My cat was making those noises crying to open the garage. I sleep with my bed against a large window, big enough that a 6-foot man can climb through easily. I know because I've done it. That opens up on an area that's fenced in. You'd have to go through my yard, or 2 of my neighbors to access it, or 1 neighbor if you could get over a barbed wire fence. A couple of years ago there were a couple months when something would tap on the window at around 2 a.m. There was nothing that could naturally tap it, like a branch in the wind, and it tapped in a pattern. Not like a complex pattern, just tap tap, pause, tap tap tap. I wouldn't have been in a defendable position if I'd tried to go out the window, as if someone was standing on either side of the window. It could fuck up whatever limb I stuck out first. I had to run around the house to check. By the time I got there was nothing. It did take away my last hope. I had hoped that it was my dog who hadn't burst at all during this, but I remembered that we'd blocked off his access after he jumps through my window during a thunderstorm. At this point I just dismissed it as a fluke, or maybe some opportunist tried then gave up when he heard me coming around the side of the house. The next week, at around the same time, it happened again, just this moderate tap right behind my head, like someone was trying to get my attention. I just about jumped out of my skin. I sat there kind of frozen for a minute, clutching the knife that I kept next to my bed, technically a straight razor. It tapped again and I finally pulled the curtain aside and there was nothing there, but I figured it could have been on one side or the other. So again I went around the house and looked in the bank, which is basically alley about 4 feet across, but there was nothing there. At this point I was pretty spooked, just paranoid as hell whenever I was trying to fall asleep. I had tried tapping different things against my window to try to figure out what it was. Plastic and wood didn't make a clear enough tone, neither did my finger, thankfully, but steel was too clear. Then I tried something. I realized that as I'm a nail biter my fingers are mostly blunt, but I've found it useful to keep one nail long to open things with. I tapped my thumbnail against it and it made the same sound. It sounds stupid but my heart sank. I just could not figure out what was going on, and by this point I was done trying. None of the neighborhood dogs alerted. It just didn't make sense. I'd considered that it might be an animal, but that would have set the dogs off. I thought maybe it was exploding head syndrome, but it wasn't loud and I wasn't falling asleep at the time. Nothing seemed to make sense. There's not even access for someone to throw stuff at this window. I was looking for holy water and sage at this point. I'm New Mexican, so the superstitions kinda seep in by osmosis. The idea that messed with me most was the idea that it was trying to get me to stick my head out the window, defenseless in a dark alley framed by th window like a headstand block or a guillotine. A couple of weeks went by without any further incidents. I was starting to feel more at ease when out of the blue it happened again. It was more persistent this time, tapping 3 and 4 times, a little harder to be honest. I was getting pissed off as well as spooked and paranoid. This time I said, louder, and then a normal speaking voice but not quite a shout, "Fuck off or I'm going to come out there and kill you, you Sonova bitch." It didn't stop, so I ran around again with my Bowie knife and again she was gone. At this point I stopped caring about being rational. Holy water on the window and the knives as well. Add sage burned in the room, the ashes rubbed against the blades. Stuff I'd picked up over the years from my TOs, TV and the internet. About 5 days later I was awakened by the sound of something slapping the window, then silence. Haven't heard anything since, still don't know what happened, but I sleep with a .357 Magnum by my head with a moon clip of superstitious hollow points. Anything tries to get in that window I'll be doing my best to make it dead. Closest I've had to an intruder. Stay safe friend. TL. Dr. Something that shouldn't have been able to access the area used to tap on my window. Can't explain what it was or how it got there.